So, welcome to Behind the Saddle, the podcast that takes you all behind the scenes of the racing and equine community. Today, I'm really excited to be joined by Richard Hoiles, a very familiar voice that you'll all know. Welcome, Richard. Thank you very much for coming and joining us today. It's really a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so we're just going to talk a little bit about your career early on. How did you get into racing? Did you grow up behind it? Was it something that you grew up behind?
So no, I don't come from a horsey background at all. Certainly not a racing background. As a kid, I loved numbers, and whether it was football averages or, I mean, these days there's a lot more data, isn't there, than we had in my time. But for them it's cricket averages, obviously, football scores, football tables, and so the form aspect of racing was really what I liked first and foremost. And yeah, I just found it fascinating as a puzzle, really, trying to solve from a numerical point of view, probably at a very basic level if I look back. But I also was sort of quite an anorak in terms of keeping notes and Lord knows what else. And then I think probably maybe it was about 9 or 10, maybe I was a little bit older, we actually went to the races. And you then sort of got the other part of it, which was the animal, and the full stretch. And we went jumping at little bank holiday meet, and I just found it just fascinating, and amazingly powerful. On TV we try to bring it into your home, but you can't replicate going and standing by a jump somewhere when something hurls itself past you at 35 miles an hour. And so that all sort of fitted into place. And so I just had an interest in racing. It was my hobby. It was, something I followed religiously. I'd drive up and down the country. I bet, I punted. And that was really all it was. I'm a qualified accountant by profession, and randomly, for various reasons, I had a couple of years up my sleeve. I didn't go to university. I only went to poly, and qualified quite young, and thought, well, I might as well try and do something that I really like to do. It wasn't I hated accounting, and stumbled into commentary. And I did stumble into it. It was just an advert in the Sporting Life. I'd never commentated before in my life, let alone, wanted to grow up being one. And I just found, seemingly, after a fair bit of improvement, that I could do it. And from then on, I've really sort of lived a rather nauseous dream for those who want to find a path in. It's just being lucky, right place, right time, and then, as I say, fortunate enough to make the most of the opportunity, really.
So was there any commentators? Obviously, I know you sort of didn't realize you're going to fall into the sport of commentating. Was there any commentators that you looked up to or you listened to, or when you were into commentating?
I mean, I listened to all of them, subconsciously, if you like, because I was there watching the race, and in a way, the commentator, as they should be, really, was rather in the background. And I remember going to the first meeting and sitting around the table, and obviously there was two new people, myself and John Hunt. We started on the same day, hence the reason we've always been such good friends, I think. And we're sitting around the table, and one by one, as people opened their mouths, because in those days no one appeared in vision. You're thinking, oh my, that's Simon Holt, or that's so and so, because until then I wouldn't have had a clue what the hell they looked like. And so it was a rather bizarre thing that you felt you were a fly on the wall. And so no, I didn't grow up wanting, I didn't really think I wanted to be Peter O'Sullivan was wonderful or anything like that. It didn't really go like that. What I did do was I spent a lot of time going around with various people. When it became obvious that I was going to get a job, or I was going to do more days, I'd spend a day with Ian Bartlett and Simon Holt were probably the two biggest influences at that stage. And you watched the way people worked and thought, blimey, I could do that or couldn't do that. And they were really laid back. They were always very mellow, just didn't get overly anxious or anything like that. Whereas others would, drive to the races with the colours on the steering wheel, thinking they had to learn everything, putting themselves under a lot of pressure. And so I suppose I tried to work, because I had no concept of how to do it, really. I just tried to work with people that I looked at and thought, yeah, that bit of what you do suits me. And it sort of went from there.
So would you take little bits from pieces from different, try and make your own sort of concept?
Yeah, I mean, without sort of turning yourself into a sort of blended commentator of everybody else, I think you have to be yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
Your own personality. I would hope that the people who hated me as a commentator hated me in real life, and vice versa. There shouldn't be a sort of, there shouldn't be a a different persona when you go on TV or anything like that from the way you commentate. And so, yeah, I know what my weaknesses are and how to try and avoid them and try to play to your strengths. And yeah, that's what you try to do. But you really, the mentality as much as anything else. I mean, Simon Holt, in particular, who I worked with, still do, but not to the same degree as I did, was someone who had a massive influence, I think, in terms of being, prepared, but not feeling you're under pressure to remember absolutely everything. And Barty would have always said to me, Bartley would always have said to me, just accept there are things you're not going to know and work out how to get out of that problem. Don't think
definitely.
you should know everything and panic when you don't, because you won't, you can't. And so that's when I judge commentators now and send in tapes. I don't care if they make mistakes. I'm more interested in how they find their way out of those mistakes, rather than someone that prepares a commentary to send to you to within an inch of its life and it's almost perfect, and that's not really realistic, so
we've all got mistakes in us, haven't we, at the end of the day? And obviously when it comes to live, obviously for yourself, when it comes to live television, it's a bit more isn't it?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, and I suppose it's the good and the bad bit of the job, in the sense that the fact that it's live obviously increases the jeopardy somewhat, and sometimes you can have had what you would say is a pretty decent commentary that's completely torpedoed by one misplaced word or something that comes out not quite as you anticipated, and there are other days when really, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. I suppose it's a bit like, if you're talented at a sport like cricket or something like that, some days the first ball comes off the middle of the bat and you think you're God, and other days you can't hit it off the square. And I think as you get more experienced, you begin to learn which day it is that you're dealing with today. And when you can't hit it off the square, you don't go charging down the pitch trying to whack it for six, because you're not going to. You just wait and play it safe. And there are other days when your brain's in a good place and all sorts of phrases flood into your head, and you can be thinking, yeah, I'll take that one, don't like that. And other days you literally just, as I say, opening your mouth to change feet, really, because you keep just, keep saying something that isn't quite right. And so there's both the frustration, but it's also, of course, the buzz as well, really, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. So do you remember your first call of the commentator? Do you remember back then? Tell us a little bit about that.
So it was strange because there were lots of different stages, if you like, because in those days, I got the job when betting shop pictures were just coming in.
Right, okay.
Sort of in the early 90s. And not all the courses were covered in live, if you like. And so what you had is, those that remember, you'll be too young to remember the Extel commentaries in betting shops, which effectively you were doing a commentary, I was listening to your commentary and re-speaking it, then someone was listening to me and re-speaking it. So by the time you got there, it was like Chinese whispers. And that's why the final furlongs always used to last forever, because by the time it was on its sixth generation, the poor person was trying to work out exactly what was going on. So my first day was at Hereford, and it was a sort of trial, and Robert Cooper was re-speaking me in the studio. So I was giving a commentary and he was re-speaking. I'd love to hear it, because I'm sure it was,
yeah, but you'd love to hear that.
I thought I did all right, but I got a message back from about after race 4 from secondhand from Robert saying, yeah, it's good, but it would just be helpful if they were in a more consistent order. So obviously, definitely. And Martin Harris was also there on the course for Extel, who has always been, again, someone I've really respected, who's commentated exactly the same time, well, longer than me. And then it's so the first time I went out live was Bath on Cup final day in 1992. And in those days, there was a separate racecourse commentary and a separate betting shop commentary. I was doing the betting shop commentary. So you stood on a roof in a little box and you were just talking to yourself, really. I mean, you weren't, obviously, but it seemed that way.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I went into the shop on the Monday morning, because they used to have full replays in shops in those days. There wasn't any racing channels or anything like that for you to catch up on at home. And I remember sitting in the betting shop as they rode, and gradually we got closer and closer to the first race at Bath, and then sitting and listening to my commentary thinking, this is just weird, because I've just stood on a roof, talked to myself, and it's gone into all these shots all over the place. And it started from there, and it was a long, steady build up with a few reverses on the way. but I just, if you're fortunate enough to stumble into something that you absolutely love, then all you want to do is to think, I've given it my best shot, and wherever that takes me is fine, as long as I don't take it for granted, mess it up, just try hard. And that's where it's all come
Yeah.
from, really.
Well, as you say, obviously, I got into horse racing when my dad used to take me when I was younger. Obviously, when I was little, 9 years old, and obviously, I figured that around that time, it was like when the betting shops stopped allowed children going into betting shops at the time. Obviously, then it changes, doesn't it? But how do you think the pathways changed in the media since them days to where it is now?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is exactly what you said. So, so my old man liked to bet, which is part of
Yeah.
the reason we didn't go racing, but he liked to bet. And mum used to work on Saturday mornings at the local dental surgery and take my sister in with her. I was left with dad.
Oh,
Dad would go.
yeah.
Dad would go to have a bet, and obviously at that stage I wasn't allowed in betting shops because I was about 14, I think. And
Yeah.
so he'd leave me outside while he ran in and, placed his bets. And then one day, one of mum's friends saw me standing outside the betting shop and obviously told her. So dad
Yeah.
got a
Yeah.
right earful. And then, of course, he's faced with a difficult decision, isn't it? What does he do next week? He can't leave me at home. Well, he could, I suppose. But so anyway, he takes me inside and we sit in the corner. Of course, there were smoke-filled shops, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
it
I
was
remember
like,
that.
and basically then I'd start going in every week. Then I'd be able to put my 5p's on. And then one day dad went away on business. I still remember really well, he went to Guyana with the bank. And it was the first Saturday when I was probably 15, maybe 16. And I was left on my own. And of course, you still look at the racing, and then you become absolutely convinced that if you don't get your bets on today is going to be the day when they all win. So
Yeah.
I cycled down to the shop, and I remember standing outside. In those days, they used to have, you only used to see them in betting shops, but for those of a generation, they'll remember them. They're sort of like rainbow streamers of plastic that was over the door, because you weren't allowed to see into betting shops. That was part
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
rules in those days. And so I remember looking at that and bolting into the corner and sitting down and writing my slips out. And of course, the more you write them out, now you feel committed. But I know I'm only, without trying to make it sound as I'm about to break the law, but I know I'm
Yeah.
underage.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
family run. It's a family run betting shop, and I go up to the I go up to the counter with my 5p's, and Norman, who was the guy who ran the shop with Terry, who was the settler, looked at me and says to me, "Does your dad know you're here?" And I remember thinking, I don't really know what to say here because And so I remember
Yeah.
saying to him, no, he doesn't because he's away. But you can tell him next week and it'll be fine. And Norman, peering over, his spectacles like mine, he peered over the top of me, took my slips and smiled. And that's how it started. And then, of course, once I was allowed into the shop, I was in there every holiday. And
Yeah.
then again, in those days, there were board markers. There were people who marked boards. There was no
Electronical.
televisions with prices. No, it was all
Yeah.
sort of longhand. And I loved the board. I mean, I love numbers, so it was fantastic. And then one day, the old boy who did the board took a turn for the worst, felt ill. Norman, who owned it, dashed up to do the board, which was fine. But after about 3 or 4 races, Terry, who was the settler, it became obvious that there was an issue. And the issue was that some bloke in the shop had an accumulator. By now, we were on leg 3 and the first 2 had won. It was a small family-run shop. They couldn't afford to let it run and lose 20 grand. So, of course, they
Yeah.
used to do what all bookmakers used to do, which was lay it off. But lay it off in those days was getting on the phone and phoning the shop up the road, and that needed to be Norman. So now we've got Norman needs to be on the phone. Terry's doing the settling. There's no one to do the board. So I volunteered. I'll do the board. And that was it. That was for 18 months. I just did the board in that shop and it was fantastic. I loved my board. It was all, had to look absolutely pucker and everything else. And then finally my mum found out that I'd been doing it. Again, I think someone went in and mentioned that, did she know, etc. And afterwards, years later, after I'd been hauled over the coals and everything else, I said, look, it's genuine. I'm getting paid. It's not, it's in cash and it probably isn't very legal, but I'm
Yeah. It's
getting
some
paid.
money.
I could be doing a lot worse. And
Yeah.
years
Exactly.
afterwards, she said to me, the biggest relief I had when I found out was she thought I was smoking 20 a day because I used to come in stinking like I
Sick
said,
because
"No,
everyone's smoking the
yeah,
bookies.
I wasn't anything to do with that, Mum. I was just working in the shop, which was sort of thick with smoke in those days." So to
Yeah,
answer your
yeah,
question, sorry, rather than go roundabout as to how it's changed, it's just the makeup of shops, which now, enticing you in. Obviously, there were then fruit machines, the pitfalls
yeah,
of those that racing's finding now. And then obviously the fact you could sit and see races. I used to know exactly how long it took me to get from home to the betting shop when I wanted to watch a race. And you could see races replayed. Now, as soon as the race is finished, you don't see a replay. It's really
yeah,
left to racing channels, which of course didn't exist, have taken the place for many people of what they used to use betting shops for. The betting shops, you always had the window cleaner. It was in, you had the postie. He'd finish work
yeah,
at 12. He'd be in there. There was normally the bloke from the Chinese takeaway, and they were all characters. You could have written a
yeah,
sitcom in there, and they were up and down the country. They were social places, whereas now they're not really. In fact, the
yeah.
social aspect of bookmaking has disappeared quite a lot, I think.
I do think in 10, 15 years the bookmakers in shops won't be there anymore because obviously it's all going online and etc. I really do think
Yeah,
that obviously.
yeah. I mean, I think so. I think the key thing for me was that. I worked in the shop till I was about 17, probably, and then I got my driver's license. I was driving within about 5 months of my birthday, and then of course I could go on track, and then I could punt on track. It was not a problem.
Yeah,
And after a while, people got to know you because I was attending quite a few meetings.
yeah,
Um, and after a while, again, people who are regulars would know when you're dashing around trying to get a price in the later stages of the betting ring, thrusting money here or there. After a while, if they know you regularly, a few bookmakers will call it to your name. And I was always young, and so I was, that was my
yeah,
name
yeah,
in the betting ring, and they'd say, 100 to 50 to young, and you wouldn't pass any money at that. You'd just be running along the ring shouting bets, and they'd be taking them. And you'd never, I mean, it was the most prized relationship. You would not leave that track until you'd settled absolutely everything, or they'd settled with you. Your relationship with your bookmaker was a jousting type one. You were trying to beat him, he was trying to beat you, but there was that
yeah,
mutual respect. Whereas now bookmaking is just an algorithm. It's just, those prices are all the same. It's not about opinions. It's not about, and that relationship with the bookmaker has now become relatively poisonous. It's become impersonal. And whereas it was one of those where I still remember the 5 or 6 books I'd used to bet with regularly, all their boards, all their things, no tickets, just purely on trust. And that seems a million miles away from where we are
yeah.
now. And look, it's
Totally changed.
understandable, but as you say, that social aspect of a betting shop, the social aspect of the relationship with your bookmaker has become clinical, cold, computer driven, and as a result, a lot more adversarial, in terms of bitterness on both sides. And that makes it difficult to progress with certain things, I think, in the industry.
No, yeah, it's very really it is really fascinating. So obviously, fast forward then a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit what your day looks like on a day-to-day basis when you go into a race course and you're going to
Yeah.
commentate?
Yeah. So, I mean, everyone has different ways of preparing, but the preparation is definitely key. So the night before, I will get into a position where I've done my basic work, which is printing the colours off, going through. I do about 4 or 5 different things. I mark up plays and fillies. I mark up everybody's first names. Trainers in form for me is always a big thing. So I've got trainers in and out of form, just little color coding. And I'll then write down the prices. I use time form ratings as a guide, and I'll write out either the draw if it's on the flat, or a map of the course with the jumps marked and numbered, so I know. And then once I've got to that stage, that is it. I'll do that for every race. I'll have been right through the card, and then it's done. And I won't look at that again, other than in exceptional circumstances, until they go to post.
Ah, right,
And
okay.
I'll learn them in that time. I won't spend any time in the morning trying to learn, other than maybe one difficult race. Maybe it's a big 2-year-old race, super sprint, something like that. But unless there's something really, really difficult, then everything else is done, and I'll trust myself to learn them and forget them, learn them, forget them as we go through the day.
Yeah.
And that's just the way I tend to operate, or tend to prefer to operate. That's the way I've got used to doing it, really.
Does the preparation change in any way, such as big meetings, such as like Cheltenham, Aintree, Grand National?
Only in terms of, not really,
Not really,
because
no.
to be honest, as you get higher up the pecking order, it becomes easier. The difficult days are
Y-
the the 0 to 60 handicappers at Redcar that run straight at you out the mist, none of
Yeah.
whom you're likely to have remembered. I mean, you and I chatting just before Champions Day, I can probably grab a field for one of those and have a pretty
Yeah.
fair stab at knowing, 50%, maybe 75%, maybe nearly all of them before I start. The only thing you're looking at is whether or not there's something unusual in that race. Maybe, a national JP McManus or Gigginsdown have 6 or 7 or, and so different caps, what looks similar, is there something that will potentially trip you up because they look similar, names are similar, anything like that. It just helps to know that before you start. If you know before you start, you won't fall victim to it. If you know there's a lot of yellow and blue, for example, you're going to be cautious if the thing in front is in yellow and blue, because you're thinking that could be more than one, it could be 3 or 4. Where are the others? Am I 100% comfortable? Whereas if there's only one grey and it's winning by 5 lengths, you could be pretty sure that you're comfortable that you've got the right winner at least, which is a start.
Yeah, that was coming on to my next question. How do you like, obviously with the big fields and stuff like that, entry and that, obviously how do you like, what's the word, how do you like go about it all? Obviously, because when you listen on the telly, like for me as a fan, it's
It's
really, you think, how is he naming all these horses in a sort of way where,
a lot of it.
on the telly you're looking at it and you think, oh wow, there's so many horses, and how do you know every name, sort of name of the runners?
So you're quite selfish, really. I mean, you need to be. If someone comes to me with you wanting to be a commentator, you say to them, "Can you be accurate fast enough?" That's the key. I can slow
Yeah,
you down, but if your brain doesn't quite work fast enough to identify and get the words out, then I can't really turn you into a commentator. Once you've got
yeah,
that, then there are lots of different ways to help yourself. So people always assume, if I'm saying the pace is strong or the pace is soft, yeah, okay, it's of interest to you at home, but it's also significant interest for me, because if the pace is strong, I will go back a lot further in the field, because the odds are the winners will be coming from the back. If the pace isn't
that's
very
it.
strong, then I'm pretty convinced that as long as I've got the first half dozen, I'm likely to have those horses that are involved in the finish. I'll go right the way through the field as early as I can, from A to Z, effectively everything that's in the race, because I want to know if there's something I don't know a long way from home. I don't want to
Yeah,
just mention half the field and then find that 3 are hurtling home that I haven't called to that point. And also, everyone's had a bet on some horse.
yeah, definitely.
And so you're trying to give them a mention using colours. I'm trying to tell you that, yours is in red. I'll tell you that early on, because then even if I ignore it, you know what you're looking at. That was probably slightly more important in betting shops, when they used to come and go with your commentaries to interrupt for shows and things, which they don't do now. And then a lot of it is, you try and sound a lot more relaxed than you're probably feeling. It's the old swan thing of serenely sailing on the top, and underneath your legs are going 19 to the dozen while you work out what the hell is that thing in fifth, and please don't get any closer because I still don't know where you are.
Yeah.
And then it just becomes covered. But a lot of the time, you're just talking about the sport you love, and it's
Yeah, definitely.
as a result, it's easy to do. But it's just that slight concern every now and again. It's a bit like lots of things in life. You get a bit overconfident at times, and this profession has a wonderful way of bloodying your nose as soon as you're
Yeah.
trying to be too clever. And it's best just to try and just not get carried
Yeah.
away, because
Have you ever have you had any nightmares on air where
oh yeah,
something's went
plenty,
wrong or
I called I've only well there's 2 types of mistakes, really. There's mistakes in virtually every commentary from everyone. It's just we notice them before you do, and I'll correct them before you do, and I won't draw attention to them, because if I say, oh sorry, that should be this, I have drawn attention to it, I'll just mop it up and
yeah,
think, okay, I know that, do that. And then there's the ones where you've gone past the point of no return. You either called A, B, and it's 5 lengths clear, and you can't suddenly change it for something else. And I've probably only called, I don't know, certainly 2, wrong winners. One was completely wrong, as in it was past the line and I'd stopped before I realised. And the other one was so late in the day that, there were 2 in similar colours, and it was understandable to a point, but it was still wrong. And that was in a Victoria Cup at Ascot, actually, so that wasn't too fun. My first one was at Newmarket. But thankfully, I'd called some 33-1 shot home in front, and natural fact, the favourite had won. So as a result, most people were pretty happy.
Yeah, but most people were really happy about
And of course,
that.
it was also free of social media and in-running betting, because those two things have been quite different. I mean, there was no in-running betting when I was starting out, when I made those two mistakes. But the race started and you'd backed a horse, and as long as I put it in roughly the right place, then that's where it was. Now, of course, in running, people are looking at different horses, wanting you to tell them this, wanting you to tell them that. There's much more an element of shooting the messenger. As soon as I say something goes well and he picks the stick up and gives it a whack, and you're thinking, oh, that's not, oh, you said it was going, and obviously social media, it's a live, as you said, it's a live sport. There's no such thing as a perfect commentary. You can all, and the nature of social media to want to be clever or undermine or what have you is I have it lightly compared to jockeys and trainers, but
Definitely.
that element of it is, and it's always after timing as well. Of course, after you've made the mistake, it's never beforehand. So you just have to learn to cope with those things. I didn't have that. It's harder for people starting out, I think, now with that background in all sorts of life, not just racing commentary.
No, definitely.
Because you should be, there's a mantra when I was an accountant: if you haven't made mistakes, if you haven't made mistakes, you haven't tried hard enough. You can't play safe and never say anything. You'll never stick your neck out. You'll never have an opinion. You'll never have, it's just a shame these days that it's so everyone wants to make themselves look better by making other people look worse. And if only everybody just concentrated on making themselves a bit better, then, and encouraging others to do the same, then the whole thing would move forward a lot more easily, I think, in lots of different ways.
Yeah, so I think that's very relatable to myself, because obviously this is quite new for me. This podcast is quite new, and obviously I'm still learning every day, and I'm bound to make mistakes further down the road. But that's just the way of learning. And obviously, you need to be committed to what you want to do, and you're bound to make mistakes. That's just the nature of life, and everyone does it.
Yeah, no, exactly right. I mean, that's the point. But it's easy, isn't it? If somebody doesn't take a dislike into your podcast or your style or your accent, and they want to constantly belittle you and always be on your timelines and this sort of thing. And it's quite hard to actually have the sort of, particularly if you have a bad day. I quite like reading some of it because I think it keeps it context, it keeps it grounded. But of course, the other thing is there's only two types of people on social media. There's people who, nicely want to praise you till they're blue in the face because they're fans, which is nice, but it's also a slightly non-representative group. And then there's the other side that think you're an absolute idiot or you're in the pocket of the bookmaker, whatever it may be, and they'll criticize as well. The problem is there's no middle ground on social media, and middle ground is where you have the discussions and you learn things and and that's where it's been left. So it's quite hard to get a representative sample of what people genuinely think and what you could learn if people were more constructive. But most of the criticism or comments aren't particularly constructive. They tend to be a little bit too personal, really, to have much impact.
No, yeah, definitely. So can you tell the viewers out there what would you say that's most surprising about your job? So more people will know.
That it's not particularly glamorous, to be honest. It's not. I mean, all the requirement we have from a commentary box is to stand on a roof and be able to see right around the whole course, if necessary, with a pair of binoculars. And that doesn't mean we sit in palatial, we sit on garden sheds on stilts in some places in the middle of winter with it blowing a gale. And look, that is not a negative aspect of the job. But if you take people up to commentary boxes, you sort of leave they walk out of their hospitality box, they walk along the corridor, and you say, right, we turn left, you open a door, and then all of a sudden it's like walking into the fire escape, and you're up the stairs, and it's like, and they're looking around thinking, oh, and then you're standing in a room. Yeah, no, it's not. I mean, don't get me wrong, some are nicer than others, but at the same time, and we don't care. I mean, that's not the point. I want a commentary box that's fit for purpose. I don't care what it looks like. But I think there is this perception that sort of, in between races, your Newmarket, for example, that you're sort of there being, fed and watered. You just mooch up and do a commentary. I promise you, for ITV, because I can't leave for ITV, I have to stand there for the whole program. And sometimes it's like standing in a 30-mile-an-hour wind tunnel for 3 hours. It's like you're being buffeted from here, there, and everywhere. And I think that's probably the aspect that most people don't understand. Is like it's not overly glam in the middle of winter, being on the roof.
No, definitely. So we're just going to talk a bit about the British racing and how where it is at the moment. Where do you think British racing is at the moment?
A bit lost. It's a shame. As someone who's so passionate about the beauty of the sport, there's loads of different things that we should be focusing more on. The difficulty is racing, more importantly, betting, I think, has for some reason in the last 15, 20 years got a very, it's the wrong way of putting it, a dirty reputation in many ways. For me, solving a race and having a bet on it to justify my opinion is more interesting, more mentally taxing than Who Wants to Be a Millionaire or
Yeah,
The Chase or any of those programs that loads of people would watch as a challenge. And I do fully appreciate, largely because my dad would have been one of them, that people do have gambling issues. I do understand that, the same way that they have drinking issues and drug issues and other things.
yeah,
I'm not belittling that, but I sort of feel that everybody who can be responsible and views it as a pastime, an enjoyable pastime, particularly for older people, keeps them mentally alert, and all they're looking to do is to enjoy it, have been rather lost and overshadowed by that small element for whom it is an issue. As I say, I'm not trying to belittle it in any way. And some of the views that people have from outside the industry as to how that's best to be sold are too draconian, and they don't necessarily help the problem. And the other thing that we've lost is we have lost the love of the horse. There's no doubt that it's the horse that is the reason
yeah,
for horse racing. It's a beautiful animal. It's well cared for. There are always welfare issues, and I'm not trying to suggest that all
yeah,
racehorses are
definitely.
wonderfully kept. They live the life. That's not. There's good advances we can make in order for racing to keep its social license when animals are being, run around a field for our pleasure, if you like. But a lot of people in the cities and what have you never come across horses anymore. They don't understand, the beauty of them, the way they're kept, the importance to the more rural community. And so if all you've done is gone and pat Dobbin's nose in the local riding centre, and then you switch on the TV and they're being asked to jump big fences, and someone tells you it's cruel, you're in time to believe them. But it's not. They are racehorses.
No,
They are bred to race. That is their commercial purpose. It's also the beauty of the animal. But unfortunately, particularly with horses, they can't recover from types of injuries that you and I just break a leg and we put us in plaster for
no,
5 months, and then we're right as rain. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately. And it's a tricky situation for racing to navigate. And because betting and welfare are both hot topics for government to be seen to doing the right thing, even if it is more pandering to the crowd than the actual reality. Unfortunately, that is the nature of politics now. And unfortunately, taking time to understand the issues and address them constructively tends to play second fiddle. So I'm slightly worried for racing. I'm slightly worried that we will be more heavily taxed, because the government needs money from various places, and gambling seems to be one of the more politically acceptable places to take it from. Whether it's right or wrong, I don't think they really care. I think they just see
no,
the fact that there's a pot in there. We need to pick as many pots as we can at the moment, and we will. The question is how much, and whether or not can racing pull together. The final thing on that would be racing's too disparate. There's too many groups in wanting
yeah,
different things. So yeah, it's a long topic, but
yeah,
it's frustrating, I think, that there's not more cooperation for the greater good. It's a much used analogy, but it is about making the cake bigger so everyone has a better slice, rather than fighting over the crumbs and the cake gets smaller and you fight over the crumbs even harder. It's hard to make a constructive thing. Sometimes I'm going to say to you, look, I appreciate what you're trying to say, but for the greater good, we have to go in this direction. And you have to wear that. And then maybe the same the next time and the next time. Whereas too many times it's like, well, no, hang on a second. I voted with you on this, so I want this in return. And you don't get anywhere. You get bogged down. So,
yeah. No, I would say going off the racing topic, me, the podcast and myself personally, we go to a lot of local riding schools in the Liverpool and Wirral area, and we see how amazing it's hard because these riding schools are really the closing down. There's a lot closing down in the area, and it's such a shame because for these kids and not just kids but for adults as well, these horses and ponies are really therapeutic for some people, and they can help with like mental health issues. children who've maybe got disabilities, and we need more people to get involved, and not just racing, but in the equine community itself, because it's such an amazing place for some people that it really helps people in the long run as well.
Yeah, 100%. And you extend that further to the type of people that work in racing yards. There's lots of people who, office life, peer pressure, and what have you, they find very anxious. And yet, being outside, working with horses, maybe riding and what have you, working with animals is really, really helpful. And those facets of the industry get lost really because, people just see the actual running around fields and having people bet on them
Yeah,
and maybe getting
definitely.
hit with something, which, we can discuss whether the whip is good or bad or what have you, but being hit and thinking, well,
Yeah,
you know, what's that all about? You're just basing it, they're just commodities that are raced around for people to have a bet. Whereas in actual fact, you go to a racing yard and you see how much they are loved by the individuals and how, if you're going to compete at a good level, and we are talking, we're 2 days before Ascot recording, it's the pinnacle of, you are not going to turn up for the QE2 or the Champion Stakes, not in the prime of condition. You wouldn't rock up
no,
to the
yeah,
Olympic final being 3 gallops short. These horses
no,
are
exactly.
primed. They're primed and they look fantastic. There's no merit in them being abused or anything like that because they just won't perform. It just doesn't make any sense. And you couldn't kill a massive amount of your raw material every year for the enterprise to flourish. Yes, there are deaths. They're very, very sad, but at the same time, they are a small proportion of those that race, and it is quite difficult, as you say, to explain the benefits of working with horses within the industry or at the racing school level, riding school level, that people see, and it can be the key that unlocks their lives.
Yeah. At the same time, we recently visited Peter Leverhulme Equine Hospital, which is in the Wirral, and some of the things that they do is remarkable. Like for these horses, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, there has been massive improvements in both in welfare and the understanding of the importance of welfare in order for racing to retain its credibility with the outside world. And that's 100% right. And I wouldn't wish in any shape or form to suggest there's not further improvements that can be made.
Yeah,
The only thing I would say is that there, unfortunately, will always be deaths
yeah,
because horses do not recover from certain injuries the same way that other participants in other sports do. And it is the most humane in some instances for the horse as well to put them down. Now, I understand if people feel that even 1 or 2 deaths makes that unacceptable as a sport for them. But when you explain that there are as many as 1 death every 2 days on a race course, and they're quite surprised, and you say, well, how many racehorses do you think run in a year? And they'll say
exactly. Yeah,
5,000, 10,000, it's 90,000. And again, I'm not trying to belittle anything. I'm just about
yeah,
context. If you have 200 in some cases about 250 deaths in a year, there have been occasions, but that is out of 90,000. Some of the proposals to restrict, do away with racing or what have you, means that far more of those 90,000 or the 12,000 horses that we have in this country would suffer hardship because you can't just turn racehorses out into fields. That's just not the way it
yeah.
works. That's not their happy life. It genuinely isn't.
No,
Everyone thinks that
definitely.
the retirement picking a field, but they'll be calling for their food at 6 o'clock. Can only be mounted on the walk. You can retrain horses, and we're doing a lot towards that. But at the same time, don't underestimate how tricky it is to home a thoroughbred or
Yeah,
turn it into a second use for some. Now, as I say, there are improvements within the industry we can always make, but unfortunately, there always will be a fatality rate, and we must accept that because it's completely unrealistic to suggest there'll never be another death in the Grand National because of something we do, because it's just not going to happen.
no, yeah, definitely. So, last question on this. Well, what's one thing you'd probably change about the sports going forward?
I change the fixture list. Um, if you gave me if I was a benevolent dictator, maybe I wouldn't be benevolent, but if I was a dictator for the sport, um, I reckon, and this is without reducing any of the fixtures. Okay, I mean, I think you can reduce some, not as
Yeah,
many as people think, because you still need to put product into betting shops. But my ability to position fixtures so that they made more sense. so that we're not racing side by side, so that there's a balance. So Sundays are better. The problem is at the moment, I mean, I was on the board at Wincanton, and if we wanted to move a fixture, we have to find someone else who wants to take it. And then the group won't want to, but at the same time, that has to be within the group. So there's not that many jockey club courses that would want one of our fixtures if we want to move it. And it's a bit like being an estate agent. You have no problem selling the 5-bedroom mansion in, leafy, wonderful suburbia. But it's the rundown block in the council estate that you can't sell, and that's what we're trying to sell. We're trying to get rid of our lousy fixture. The odds are it's going to be lousy for everybody else. Whereas if you said to me, right, you position the fixtures, you can keep the ownership, even if you just get me 25% of them, and then I can say, right, let's not have that Fontwell and Goodwood clash. Let's not have Haydock racing on the same day as Chester. Let's make sure that the Sundays aren't rubbish. Because historically we didn't have Sunday racing, so all was left when the fixtures came out was poor fixtures. Give me a chance to build that up. When should we race? I think if I could have one thing, I reckon I could take the fixture list we currently have and increase turnover on racing by 20% easily, just by repositioning fixtures to make them more sense. And I wish everyone would be a little bit more open to that. I won't challenge the fact that you have the right to own them, because I don't think. I think that would be very, very difficult to get through courts. And my old accounting hat on, because they're an asset to you. That's what you borrow off. You need to have assets to raise money. Your assets are your fixture list, and that's what raises you money. That's why you don't want to give any of them away. But if you're not asking to give them away, just give them to me and let me reposition them, then I think that's a different thing. So I think the fixture list is the biggest single impediment, as we currently stand, to making racing make more sense, if that does make sense.
Yeah, no, definitely, 100% agree. Yeah, 100% agree. Right, we're going to play a little game now. We're going to call it like Hoiles. So what we're going to do, we're at a 5-furlong straight at stand down, and we're going to get you to commentate on the race, if that's okay.
Okay. Yep, go on.
We're going to have 3 horses, one called Behind the Saddle, one called Hoiles, and one called
Hoiles, yeah.
Hoiles, and one's called Liam's horse.
Liam's horse.
Liam's horse.
Liam's horse.
Liam's horse.
So Behind the Saddle, Hoiles, and Liam's horse. And what's the game called? What's the game called?
Call it like Hoiles.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. Come on then. Right.
So I'll go there off, and then we'll go wherever you want to do.
Okay.
Yeah?
Right. Go on then. You can count.
And they're off.
It's the Call It Like Hoiles handicap, and Hoiles slow away, as he usually is in the mornings, as Beside the Saddle is fastest into stride as they race through the first furlong. Liam's horse drops in behind with Hoiles just pushed along in 3rd place. First quarter mile, and Behind the Saddle continues to breeze along in front. Liam's horse and Hoiles disputing second as they head down towards the halfway stage. Behind the Saddle, just coming under pressure for the first time. Hoiles hanging to the left, and Liam's horse travelling up strongly as they race inside the final 2 furlongs. Liam's horse travelling on the outside moves to Behind the Saddle. Hoiles still under strong pressure. They meet the rising ground inside the final furlong, and Liam's horse breezes to the front past Behind the Saddle. Hoiles looks completely ungenuine in 3rd, and up towards the line it's Liam's horse who wins the Call It Like Hoiles handicap, but comfortably from Behind the Saddle, and back in 3rd, the reluctant looking Hoiles.
That was fantastic, that, Richard. Well done. That was great. Just going to ask you if you come to
You see, normally the one time you tend to do those is when you're doing a charity race night, and they normally raffle the last race of the night.
Oh, right, okay.
And they're allowed to choose the names, and obviously you get all of the normal ones. So you were very kind there without giving me your who farted and the others on a race night. So it was quite straightforward, really.
No, that was really great, that, Richard. So we're just going to finish off the interview with a quick fire question, if that's okay.
Yeah, go on, fire away.
So what would you say your favourite race course is in the UK and Ireland?
Well, if I'm going, then it would have been Fontwell, because it's you can get so close to the action. Plumpton still as well. 2 little courses. I love country tracks. I love small days racing. When I give up ITV, I will go around the tracks for 4 or 5 years, being the Darren Anderton playing down the divisions, because I still really enjoy those small tracks. On a lovely sunny day, Goodwood is superb. There aren't too many I dislike. One of the benefits of the job is the fact it is variety. If I go the last week, I've been to Musselburgh, Newcastle, Wetherby, there'll be Ascot, there'll be Bath. you move around the country. They're all good in their own right,
Yeah.
but Plumpton and Fontwell, if that's where it started, and that's where I hope it will end.
Yeah, I love, obviously not far from me, but I love Chester, mate. I love
Yeah,
Chester.
again, close to the action, aren't you? Good
Yeah,
atmosphere.
exactly.
Yeah, fun
Not
to
too
call
far
because
away
the
from
crowd's
me.
good. Get into the crowd. It's great.
Yeah, exactly.
So my missus
What
comes
would
from
you?
your neck of the wood. My missus comes from your
Yeah,
neck of the woods, and everybody. If I say what I do down south when we were growing up, there's been loads of people that say, "Oh, we've never been racing." When I met Sarah and we went up north, all our mates have been to Chester. All your mates have been to
yeah.
Chester by your
Everyone's been
18s
to Chester, especially
on a
up
Friday
these
night.
ways. Like,
Yeah, exactly right. So and that's what makes Aintree so good. My fun most meeting of the year is it's a city's race. It's a city's
yeah,
race. Rather.
definitely, 100%.
So yeah,
What would you say your favorite fit ever race to call was?
I
You must have
suppose.
so many.
Yeah, no, I think no, there is one that will always probably, it's quite a while ago now, which is rather sad because I'm not going to be able to beat it. And that was Denman's Gold Cup. And that was just because I'm lucky with ITV, but my audience they don't hear me. I don't see them. They don't respond to me. They might do in their living rooms,
Yeah,
but obviously I don't get that. When you're on the race course, you do have that response with the crowd. And that Denman Corto Star Gold Cup was everybody had such strong opinions. The response to the crowd was like nothing I've ever had before or after. All you had to do was
yeah,
just dangling a bit of bait or reeling in a fish. It was just mention something and you got a response. And I remember thinking, circuit out, blimey, just be careful here, because if you go too soon, it's just going to go
yeah,
berserk. So all you're just trying to do is drip feed in things. And the response was absolutely brilliant. I mean, the race itself wasn't particularly exciting in the way Denman just powered away and what have you. But in terms of a crowd reaction, and I've met people who can, so just briefly to go off, it's not a great commentary. It's where the commentary fits what people are listening to. That's what makes a
yeah,
good commentary. And you then become the soundtrack to a well-loved event. And obviously loads of people have watched that race back. And if your commentary seemed to chime with what they were thinking or seeing, they then like your commentary. But they don't sit and listen to the race and say, what a great commentary. Your commentary sort of comes afterwards. And there's people that can recite to me, I'm slightly worried by them, I have to admit, word
yeah.
by word, my entire final circuit, because it's
Oh
meant that
wow.
much to them.
Yeah, yeah,
And like,
exactly.
so in a way, that is, and it's not because I think, wow, a fantastic commentary. It was just, I was so in sync with the crowd. The crowd were responding, you felt like God in a way.
Yeah,
But in actual fact, it was just, you were finding phrases that fitted what people, they're what has been an iconic memory for lots and lots of people of that generation, that day at Cheltenham, I think.
what would you say? An upcoming jockey to keep an eye on. Who do you think?
Upcoming jockeys, who do I think is good? I'm on the spot. I'm probably not going to get the ones that I think are really good, but the Callan lads are pretty good. Jack Callan is good. I mean, obviously Billy Loughnane is a household name now, but he's one of the very few who I think is going to be capable of breaking in right the way to the top level. Now he's got some support from Godolphin.
Yeah,
I just like jockeys that are tidy more than anything else. Jack Nicholls is also very tidy. Don't try and do things you can't. Don't be too flamboyant. A lot about race riding is to make the 60-40 calls instinctively. William Buick's always been that for me. I've known him since he was about 12 or 13 because his dad used to work in the press room, and he's very good at making those instinctive decisions. Tom Marquand would be the same. But I think in terms of youngsters, Jack Nicholls and Jack Callan would both be ones I would expect to progress beyond their claims, as long as they don't have weight issues and what have you, which obviously can stop people transitioning. Then I think they're both very, very tidy young riders.
so here's one last question, Richard. So, what advice would you give for young people who want to come up in the sport, or not just young people, people who want to get into racing or want to come to racing?
Yeah, you have to push on doors. You have to be quite persistent. The one thing I would say is that I didn't know anyone in racing when I started. I genuinely didn't know anyone.
Yeah,
And throughout my time, people have been very accommodating with, giving me advice, letting me spend days with them, understanding what's gone on. Don't be put off, research it. In terms of, by research, I mean, don't just expect a door to open. You do have to sort of push your way through it. I wrote loads and loads of letters, eventually before I answered that one ad with no response. But people are very accommodating. If you share a common love of something and you want to go and spend a day in your local stable, rest assured you'll be very, very welcome. Because a lot of people who go to the British Racing School, the Northern Racing School, they've never ridden before at all. Don't feel you have to have past experience. Don't even think you've had to be around a horse. Why should we expect you to be around a horse if you grow up in Islington? But if you have a desire that you want to work with animals, you want to be part of a racing stable, you want to work at your local racecourse. One of the greatest pleasures I have, obviously as an older generation with clients, there are literally hundreds, and they would be hundreds of people I know who stand on gates at racecourses. And I say I know, as in I don't know their names, but I've known them for years, who I say hello to, stop and have a chat to. And they're doing things they love because they love the sport. And the greatest passion for me will always be that I've been fortunate in life to do something that I really, really love. A lot of people say, you're really lucky, and I am. But you say to them, what do you really love? And they say, I want to be a pilot. So, well, what did you do about it? And it's like, well, you say, well, hang on a second. British Airways aren't going to knock on your door and say, do you want to fly you've got to at least have an idea of where you want to go. And a lot of local people, whether it be stables, yards, race courses, whatever, they will appreciate people getting in touch saying, I want to know more about this. And that's, and you can find it through YouTube. Don't feel you've got to have experience. Enthusiasm, the ability to work hard, will carry you an awful long way.
Definitely. Well, thank you very much, Richard. It's been a real pleasure talking to you today. I really appreciate you coming on the Behind the Saddle podcast, and hopefully we'll see each other at a race course in the future.
Yeah, I hope so, Liam. And that Liam's horse was ridiculously well handicapped. I don't know if you managed to do that.